Good evening at the time of this recording. Welcome back to episode 2 of Chicanery, sort of the working title here. It is your wonderful host. I am Danny, and here we have JT.
Hello.
So there is quite a bit to get into. Got a whole bunch of IndyCar stuff planned today. But before we get into that, sort of a proper introduction. So, of course, this is chicanery again, kind of a working title. Let's make it workshopped. But you're probably familiar with the main show, Victory Lane Vibes. This is a fun offshoot that talks about everything except NASCAR. Um, you know, we both have interests. JT, you said you got started in being interested. It got started as a motorsports fan during the pandemic, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that is correct. During the pandemic is when I mainly started watching racing, then pretty much just continued since then. Started with NASCAR and then just branched off when I found other racing series that I found a little bit more interesting. No shade to NASCAR, but it's like secondary compared to all the other racing series that I watch or bother investing emotional energy into.
Yes, and I have been a motorsports enthusiast since I was a little kid. It started with NASCAR and back then American Le Mans for me, and this is in the early aughts. But but yes, so we are going to be like I said, we've got lots of juicy IndyCar stuff for y'all this evening. So I suppose without any further ado, well, let's get into it. IndyCar at Laguna Seca. Holy crap.
What a mess.
Yes. Um, a number of people talked about, I've heard things like amateur, I have heard shambolic. Pretty much if it was a negative adverb, I think it was applied
I
to
mean, you
the
had
season
Zach Brown
finale.
saying it was the most amateur racing he had ever seen, which I'm like, kind of accurate. I can't lie, as much as I don't really like him, it's kind of, I'll give him that. He's kind of on point with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was just absolutely atrocious racing. Had multiple punts and offs at can't remember since they reprofiled the track. Is that still technically turn 2 or are they calling that turn 1 now?
I have no idea. I just remember like all the stuff that happened like at turn one at the
Mhm.
beginning was
Yeah.
particularly egregious because like for one, there were like once again IndyCar race control was inconsistent with their calling, which it's at this point it feels kind of like paradoxical because it's like it's consistent inconsistency. Like they've been like that the whole year, so it's kind of like not really a surprise that they were kind of just like whatever. Like there were people who jumped the start at the very beginning of the race, I'm pretty sure, and then just like calamity corner turn one. And it's like just it's like is this Laguna Seca or Nashville? I mean, maybe it was good that it was chaotic because it gives people a preview to what next season, Nashville being the finale race, is probably might be similar to that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was, I guess there's, the joke, death, taxes, and IndyCar race control being absolute garbage. Just are all inevitabilities. And yes, no, this, we joke about, Crashville, of course, and Nashville this year was honestly pretty tame, but that was more than made up for with Laguna Seca, and I know some of the incidences and practice and quality because they just resurfaced the track. So it was very, very green when IndyCar initially started, but the track had more or less bedded in by race day, and it was just a nightmare, quite
Yeah,
frankly.
I was kind of trying to give the drivers like benefit of the doubt and be like, okay, maybe like some of it, like at least all the like incidents and like clumsiness that happened during like practice and qualifying. I'm like, okay, it's probably because the track was resurfaced and they're still kind of like getting used to the resurface. But during race day, I'm like, okay, I was kind of like, okay, maybe it's still the resurfacing, but then like after a while, like, okay, this is just like horrible driving. And then part of it might have been because like where they had the restart zone, I don't know why they had the restart zone like all the way at like the last corner where they were doing restarts and crash on restarts.
Oh my
It's like
god.
maybe you should have just like moved it or something. Like maybe they should have taken a page out of NASCAR's book how they moved the Indy road course restart further
Mhm.
back and it avoided all the like turn one messiness that usually happen. So it's like maybe they should have done that. I don't really know. Honestly, it was just the weirdest race of the whole season. And then you even had the pace car running out of fuel. They had to refuel the pace car during one of the yellows because there were so many yellows that the pace car was running out of fuel. It's like I don't even know. I didn't even know what was going on personally.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely manic race. Yeah, much like you, like I said, I had chalked it up to just a green track, but by the end of certainly practice and qualifying, a racing line had absolutely been rubbered in. There was more than enough grit for them to figure out it was genuinely just poor driving. And I think it is just that simple. Um, because it's like the package, road course package really isn't any different. Like I said, the track had gotten rubbered in. Yeah, it was just an exceptionally poor standard of driving was what was responsible for all of this. But yes, the pace car needing to be refueled, I think was kind of the perfect if you could just encapsulate one moment from that race, it is that shot of them, panning. I think it's actually was the drone panning over the safety car and while they're refueling, just yeah, just perfectly sums up how this race was. It was absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, you probably couldn't even write that as a script. I mean, even if you were paid or had like half your life to do that, I don't even think, hell, I know I couldn't write that. Like, it's just, you just couldn't make it up, truly.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
so silly.
you had the Juncos drama with Canapino and Ilott, where once again, Canapino fans were sending him death threats over something that was really like insignificant that had happened on track. And then I guess Juncos called themselves responding to it, but like their statement was just horrible. Like it was horrible, and the wording was just like, oh, like it was very passive. It wasn't really like saying anything, like making us like standing for anything. It's like you have one of your drivers receiving death threats who are fans of your other driver, and y'all are just like, yeah, I know things can get really heated, but we need to like stop the negativity. And it's like it's not negativity, it's literal death threats. And it's like the fact that you couldn't even like make a decent statement. It's just like, and a lot of people were like grilling them for that, like me included. And I'm just
Mhm.
like, ugh, a lot of people were probably thinking that it's like maybe Callum Ilott should like find another team or like slowly make his way to a different team because clearly the work environment is very toxic and it kind of seems like they don't really care too much about him and are just willing to throw him to the wolves and not really defend him when it's needed. So I don't really know.
Yeah, I it was just it calling that statement boilerplate is honestly kind of an insult to actual boilerplate statements, if I'm being perfectly honest. It was just no good. And in a smaller team like Juncos, I understand that, Canapino brings money, and I understand that there, to some extent, is going to be a vested interest in keeping him reasonably happy, but at the expense of their other and arguably kind of franchise driver at this point. Um, it's it's no good. Certainly, the public statement, a firmer hand, really needed to be issued, and they just didn't do that. Because I gave them stick too for it on Twitter because when you this is the second time this season that this has happened.
The second time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like it's what it's that scene from Phineas and Ferb where if I had a nickel for every time it happened, yeah, sure, I would only have two nickels, but it's really strange that this has happened twice.
I mean, to me, it's not that strange because it's like a lot of Argentinian sports fans are very passionate,
Oh yeah, that's fair
and
actually.
seeing some of their behavior, like that I saw during like the World Cup with some of them, I'm like, yeah, I can't be too surprised that they're sending death threats to somebody that really hasn't done anything.
Yeah, actually, that's fair. I do forget about that. So maybe not strange, but it's certainly frustrating that it has happened twice and that Junkos has been effectively silent both times.
All right, so was Laguna Seca a good race or not? Because I'm gonna say no, it was not a good race. Like entertaining, yes, but like a quality race, not so much.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly was it chaotic and ridiculous and yes, to some extent, that kind of that primal lizard brain part of me found it entertaining. Yes, but quality absolutely not. They talk about, the racing product. In this case, what product? Well, the product was everybody off in the sand at some point during the race. That's not good racing. Again, it's, very silly, and this will be there's meme potential all the way through to next year with this race, but that doesn't make it a good one. So yeah, no, not a good race at all.
Personally, I think it was just because it was a race at the end of it was the end of the season. Everybody's tired. They're kind of probably fed up. You know, they've been traveling and going to races the whole season. Everybody's again, they're tired. They don't really have patience. So it's like, yeah, I kind of get why that happened. But anyways, season review of the 2023 IndyCar season. Was 2023 a good season in your opinion?
Broadly speaking, I don't think it was too bad necessarily. I would say, and on the whole, I would say yes. I enjoyed the season. The scrap, I mean, Pillow ran away with the championship this year. So, from a championship fight perspective, no. But I think basically second on through back, I honestly think was good. So I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being appalling, 10 being perfection, I would give this year as a whole probably like an 8, 8.5.
Yeah, I'd probably give it the same, an 8 or an 8.5. The ratings seem pretty good, at least for TV wise, for those who are usually concerned about that. Even though it's like TV ratings probably don't mean that much nowadays since people don't really watch cable anymore, but ratings wise, it seemed to be decent. Um, I guess what was the best race of the year and what was the worst race of the year?
Best race? Hmm. Best race of the year, and we'll touch on this. We'll get to this later. But honestly, I really, really enjoyed Texas this year. Um, I thought Texas was super fun. Um, Texas, and actually, I thought Portland was actually pretty good too. So probably a toss up between those two for me.
Yeah, I would definitely say Texas was good, surprisingly good, but it
Hmm.
seems to be that they found a workable solution to the PJ1
Oh God,
issue that they've had before. So
yeah.
I think now that they have a solution to it, the racing product shouldn't be that well, or it shouldn't be, shouldn't be as bad as it was like 2021, 2022.
Hmm.
The worst race probably was Laguna Seca, I'm not gonna lie. I probably, if it was last year, I would have said Nashville for sure, even though I was there and it was fun. But again, a crash fest,
Hmm.
aka why it's dubbed Crashville. But Yeah, I think Laguna Seca, as much as I like that track and it has very much importance in the motorsports world, whether it be IndyCar or sports car racing, that race was atrocious. So that is gonna have to go to Laguna Seca as the worst race of the year.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was like I said, talking about it, what product, it was just appalling race, and just everything about that race, frankly, was absolute garbage. So yeah, and I completely agree. Laguna Seca by a country mile. Um, Certainly for a racing product, I guess broad interest. Ironically enough, Crashville was actually pretty quiet this year. I think it was certainly one of the less interesting races, but at least it was a race, not a basically event run behind a pace car with about 5 laps here and there of racing. Large air quotes.
Honestly, I was disappointed that Nashville was so calm this year because I'm like, if you could, y'all had this in you the whole time, like you had the ability to race calmly and not crash going into like every single corner. It's like, where was that last year? Like the first year, I could understand why it was so bad because new track, it's a street course. You kind of have to figure it out a little bit. Same with like the new Detroit layout, kind of have to figure your way out a little bit. But it's like after a second year, you couldn't race cleanly, and now all of a sudden you're like, yeah, great, smooth, no problems, minimal yellows. It's like mind blown.
Mhm.
All right. So I guess keeping on the theme of like best and worst, what were the best performing teams and the worst performing teams in IndyCar this season?
Best performing teams. Well, actually, because I enjoy doing this the other way around. So I'm actually gonna start with worst. Um, Probably one of the worst performing teams for me. Rahal was just a bag of garbage most of the year. It was so bad. And I understand, this is certainly not the RLO, I say of old. I know we're a number of years removed from it at this point. But even with that bit of additional context, the first like 2/3 of the year was appalling in a way that if you had asked me, at the beginning of the year, I wouldn't have said that they would have been that bad, getting bumped out of the Indy 500 bad, starting, in the back third of the field most of the year bad. That was just, that was absolutely horrid.
They were getting outperformed by rookies at the 500.
Yeah, I just, no. It is just so bad. Um, I don't, I'm just not about it. And another one which disappointed me a bit was definitely I expect
Andretti.
yeah, I was just about to say I expected more of Andretti this year. Um, same thing, I know kind of, swings and roundabouts as they say with where they're fast and where they're not. But even the places where you expected them to be a little bit where you expected them to be fast, they were never really there. Um,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
like I was expecting them to do well on like road courses and street
mhm,
courses because that's usually where they do well at. Like they do well in qualifying and they do well in the races. But like, yeah, like you said, they just weren't there. Like I personally, when it came to ovals, I was not shocked because it was since last year their oval strategies have been like I don't know. Like literally that's all I can say is I don't know. I don't know what they do with their oval strategies, their oval setups, but whatever they do just doesn't work and they have like little to no pace on
mhm,
ovals and it's like yeah, and then even like tracks that they're usually good at, again, they really weren't there. I'm like
mhm.
I don't know what's happened to this team.
Yeah. I was also a bit disappointed in Arrow McLaren this year too. I know they expanded to, a three-car op, and I know because it's still technically they're still in the old Schmidt Peterson facility, which was really never intended for that. So I think some of this is some growing pains with McLaren, but I did expect a bit more from them this year too, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I kind of agree too. Like they weren't necessarily as bad as like say Ray Hall or
Oh
like
no, absolutely not.
Andretti, but they definitely were not like they did get podiums and stuff, but I was actually expecting them to like get a win or something, at
Yeah,
least like award to get a win for them, at
mhm.
least before the season was over. It never happened. So
Yeah, that's the thing, they were not bad by any stretch of the imagination, let me make that perfectly clear, but like I said, I expected more contention just for race wins, um, as opposed to where, like I said, they got a few podiums this year, and that was about it.
um Meyershank Racing still probably one of the worst performing teams in IndyCar, but I mean that's not shocking because that was kind of like known since last year.
Mhm.
Maybe next season it'll be slightly better. I don't really have too much hope, but
Yeah, yeah, we'll see.
maybe.
Yeah, but like I said, Meyershank being bad, I mean, is it a bummer? Yes, and that's just because I like the folks at Meyershank, but is it surprising? No, not really.
Best
But
performing teams probably Penske, I can't lie.
mhm. Yeah, Penske was very, very good.
Ganassi.
Ganassi was very, very good. And even AJ Foyt Racing really punched above their weight this year. They were, now granted their forte is definitely more the ovals than the street courses, but when they were quick, they were like a genuine force. Like, could they steal a win here? Granted, that never quite panned out, but I was surprised to see them mix it up in the top 10 at points when they did.
I mean, they definitely exceeded my expectations for them because when I saw St. Pete the first race, I was like, oh dear Lord, this team is not gonna do well this season.
Hmm.
But surprisingly enough, it wasn't that bad for them.
No, not at all.
So what are we expecting for next season? Like any expectations for any teams or drivers to do either better than they did this season or potentially worse than they did this season? I
Mm,
know I personally think that what might happen, at least Andretti, I think Marcus Ericsson might end up doing worse than he did with Ganassi since again, different setup, and then also if Andretti still doesn't improve their oval setups, then he's gonna be going from Ganassi oval setups to Andretti oval setups, and that's probably gonna be a huge like shock or a wake up call for somebody that's used to running like no worse than top 10 on ovals.
yeah, I agree. I can definitely see that being a shock for Marcus. I think there's some potential. If this sort of momentum that we have seen, like I said, particularly, I think there is a chance if Ray Hall can sustain the momentum that they picked up, in particular, like the last three races, I can see them being kind of upwardly mobile through sort of the team standings next year. Now, granted, that relies on a lot of things. Namely, it requires Nepo baby to not be completely useless, um, which I realize is more than just a notion, but like I said, they looked racy towards the end of the season, so I don't
It also
see.
depends on who they put in the 30 car because
And
that's
there's
still
also that.
unknown.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't know who's gonna end up there, but yeah, I think there's a shot there for them to move up. Um, I think I know uh, McLaren, I know they are working on expanding their facilities in IndyCar, so if they get that together, then I think they could potentially be I say upwardly mobile. Truth be told, they don't really have that much further up to go, but I think they can bag a couple wins next year. There aren't any teams that I can really foresee that just sink into the metaphorical ocean here. moving
I mean,
downwards.
nobody really should. I mean, I
Yeah.
think what'll happen is like it'll probably stay mostly the same.
Mhm.
So I mean,
Yeah.
like some teams are getting like kind of like complete overhauls. Like technically, Meyershank Racing is getting a complete overhaul in the sense that they're completely new driver lineup, but I don't really see that changing much.
Mm-mm.
Like, yeah, these people are talented that they have. Like, it's not like Felix and Tom aren't talented people. Like, they are. It's just that that equipment is not up to their ability to actually like perform well. So it's
Yeah.
likely that there's gonna be no change in Meyershank's pace, at least from a year, at least like in a year change, probably not much.
Yeah, I don't expect there to be much change there. I'd be interested just kind of due to external factors. Because I mean, we both are familiar with the winding saga that has been, Andretti trying to get itself onto the F1 grid. Because I mean, they did this whole rebrand, Andretti Global here a few weeks ago with the redesigned logos and colors and stuff. I wonder if there's some potential, especially if they are granted entry onto the grid, if that could wonder if that could almost serve as a little bit of a distraction for them potentially, because Michael is very clearly putting all of his eggs in that basket. So
It
that I'm
could. It really could.
I'm curious about, and on the same vein, given that McLaren is really not willing to let Alex off the hook, I wonder what potentially an off season of in legal squabbling. I wonder what that could do to the pair of them.
I also wonder if Andretti is keeping their four-car lineup or they're downsizing to just like three. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's a very good question there. Like I said, lots of kind of moving parts and pieces. That's part of why it is, in additionally to wanting just an additional team on the grid. I'm watching the FIAV Andretti GM thing very closely to kind of see what happens there.
I guess as far as it goes for individual drivers, a driver that I feel like had a particularly like kind of rough season was Colton Herta. I feel like
Hmm.
his season was not as good as like previous seasons that he's had in IndyCar. It's like what happened?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it is, to be honest. There's no real one thing that when I kind of think through the season that I can really pinpoint. I mean, granted, Colton has always been kind of a checkers or wreckers kind of driver. Either he'll win it or, he'll stuff it in the barriers. But except I guess the difference is that just this year it was wreckers, basically. He just spun or stuffed it in the barriers like all the time. Um, yeah, I don't know where the speed has gone. I don't know if that's an Andretti issue. I don't know if that's a Colton issue. I couldn't tell you which
I mean,
exactly
you had
where's.
some people speculating that it was because they changed his strategist. His dad isn't his strategist anymore, but I'm like, I don't think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, certainly, I mean, strategists are absolutely important, but I think it's more than just that. It honestly just seems to be a drop in raw pace, and that's nothing that a strategist can really do anything about.
Plus, they kind of made it seem like he didn't really get along with his dad that well, anyways, when like
Mhm.
they were working together. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, then there were some spicy radio messages when he did have his father on.
They're very funny, but it's like at the
Yes.
same time, I'm like, should they be showing this? But it's like you're kind of making it seem like they don't get along.
Mhm.
And maybe this is not like the most productive relationship, but I don't know. I
Yeah.
really don't know because I don't work on that team. Uh, so I have no idea what's going on. To me, Andretti is kind of like an enigma. Like they're just, they were kind of all over the place this year.
Mhm. Indeed. Um I guess another sort of, I guess, surprise for me, and it's kind of in a similar vein, is definitely Alexander Rossi. Kind of the same thing. The Colton just wasn't particularly quick this year, and the same thing.
I mean, he
uh,
had some moments.
he had some moments where he was looking kind of spicy, but then usually, and to be fair, Alex was absolutely the victim of some circumstance because he got wiped out by Kirkwood in the pits. I think that was at Texas when that happened.
His old
Um,
car wiped him out.
yeah, yeah. So it's like, okay. So that sucked, and then, but I mean, some of it was again just unforced errors by himself. Spinning in spots and places. When he was running pretty well. So I would be
That was
interested
the same
to.
thing with Grosjean. Because, like, I
Hmm.
feel like to some degree with Rossi, you could chalk it up to he's in a new car at a new team, so you could be like, oh, maybe it's like growing pains. You have to get used to like the new car and being on a different team, different environment, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Grosjean kind of had the same thing going on with him. He would do fine, and then there'd be just random like errors on his part, and then like St. Pete. I mean, he could have won that race. He
Yes.
genuinely could have won that race. And if he didn't win, there was a potential that he would have been like on the podium, like second or third, like at the worst. Then like he collided with Scott into like the tire barriers at that one turn, and then was like throwing his hands up like he does all the time. Same thing happened at like I think it was Toronto, and it's
Hmm.
like okay. How many times are we gonna see the same thing play out with the same dude?
Yeah, and that was the thing. I was actually watching a video, sort of kind of a post-mortem of Roman's season. And yeah, and then, there were some early signs of speed, kind of early in the season, but then it just kind of all went downhill and, crashing and, yelling at folks. And it's like, hey, which from what I've heard, that has not did not go down particularly well, in the team. So,
I mean,
we'll
it's possible that maybe he just doesn't fit in with Andretti that much, and it's
I
just
don't
like
think so.
I think we talked about this last episode that it's like some of it's like the car setup. He likes the car being set up to like a very specific way, and if it's not like that, it's probably gonna be harder for him to put up good results. And some of it's like being at Andretti is like a lot of pressure because I mean, maybe not so much now judging on like their performance, but I guess like Andretti is considered like a top tier team, and then that can come with like just a lot of pressure. Because I mean, he seemed to do well when he was with Dale Coyne,
Mhm.
so maybe he'll go back with that team. Depending upon what they do, I don't really know. Like if they're looking to like bring up some of like their Indy Next talents, then maybe he gets like the short end of the stick and ends up having to do something else that's not IndyCar. But we'll see.
Yeah, honestly, I could see it going either way. I could see him, basically tucking his tail between his legs and going back to Dale Coyne. But like I said, I could also see him ostensibly this being kind of the kiss of death. I guess I could honestly see, you can kind of talk about where exactly the train went off the tracks. I think it was very much just the one of the dumbest blunders I have ever seen at Toronto when he put it in the barriers. And then, he was like, "Oh, it won't turn, it won't turn." And then,
He
the
said he
broadcast
lost the wheel out of his hands.
yeah, I say the broadcast goes to a replay in car, and it's just his hands fell off the wheel. And then, meanwhile, Roman's going on about, "Oh, but it's the car, it's the car." That is the moment for me when it's like, this season is lost for, Roman. But yeah, I don't know. I see him out of a ride, next year, to be perfectly honest. He fit in well at Dale Coyne, but I think this stint at, Andretti has probably labeled him as damaged goods.
Yeah, it's possible he ends up without a ride because again, if Dale Coyne does look at like, 'cause a lot of their Indy Next people are doing pretty well. So it's like
Mhm.
if they're like, yeah, we're just gonna like bring these people into IndyCar now, and we're not gonna really want to waste too much time on Grosjean just because like he is. getting older, then it's possible that again he's out of a ride and has to find something else to do. I mean, he is a factory driver for Lambo, so he's not completely just like floating out in the ocean all by himself. I mean, he could essentially go to the World Endurance Championship and then just drive the Lambo hypercar they have for next season.
which is still just so wild to me to think that he's got a hypercar deal, a factory deal inked, especially after this just mess of
I
a
mean,
season that he's
Kvyat did
had.
too, so it's
Yeah,
just at this point.
that man's gonna race
Hell,
until he's
who
like
really
60.
is shocking that they got a hypercar ride was freaking Jacques Villeneuve, of all
Oh my
people.
god, yeah, I
Freaking
forgot about
Van
that.
Wall.
Yeah, I mean, Van
Van
Wall's
Wall
kind of a
DNFing in Le Mans for like the past like 5 plus years.
I was just about to say Van Wall's kind of a meme team, in and of itself, and that was absolutely a meme signing. It's like, why would you pick Jacques Villeneuve of all people to do this? It's like, you really mean to tell me you couldn't have found anybody else to
It's
find that
just they're
right?
just they're not even like it's just so funny how it's just not even like a serious team. Like
No.
they rarely it was rare that this season that they were actually competing with other hypercars in their own class. They were usually spending most of their time, most of the race, like either trundling around at the back of like the hypercar field and like beefing with LMP2s for like
Yeah.
position. And it's like this is not real.
No. Yeah, I was just about to say, yes, it's like, you're a hypercar, but you have, the P2 setting comparable lap times to you. It's like, how on earth does that happen? Oh
It's
my
funny
goodness.
because you can literally see like when like at the start of like the 6 hours of Fuji, like you can see like the whole like hypercar field, like they like accelerate into turn one, and then you see the van wall in the back with the P2s, and it's just so funny.
People meme on the P2s, but they're great because then you get moments like that.
The P2s are less they're a little bit more calm than LMP3s. Like their LMP3s are the ultimate memes of
Yes.
sports car racing.
Yeah, something, wealthy dentist.
At least, well, next season they won't be in WeatherTech anymore, so
No, they won't, which honestly, that's probably about time, but yes, I will miss the
they
memes.
never should have been there in the first place. But
Agreed. I thought it was silly in the first place. I was like, "Okay, well, fine. If this is the way you guys wanna pad out the field, then, I mean, be my guest," but
I mean, like, and the same, like, it's like for me, it's like, okay, yay, let's celebrate because we won't have any more LMP3s to like randomly ruin somebody's race in the middle of like the 24 hours of Daytona by like running into them in like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, which happened to like Porsche, I think. They were like an
Uh-huh.
LMP3 like hunted them off the track and then they like had damaged their car. And then they also got ran into one under like full course yellow at Sebring. Then it's like also it's like oh no more like LP3 moment memes for at least like the main series.
Yeah. Yeah, though, I'll tell you what, occasionally the, BMW hypercar has filled that role with the way because they speared off the Corvettes at the very end one of the Corvettes at the very end of, Daytona this year because he was, trying to go for a move even though, through I think it was through Indianapolis, the Corvette was fighting for class win, and the BMW just wasn't patient and just annihilated, one of the Corvettes. It's like, "Are you kidding me?" But they seem to have gotten that together, so I don't think we'll have, hypercars acting like P3s too much here,
I
going
mean, the
forward.
BMW, they were probably just at this. Daytona was so bad for them that it's like, you know
Yes.
what? I maybe they were fed up. You know, they just lost the patience.
Yeah, you're probably right, but, yes, they were the P3 moment of that race. But
Going
oh,
back to IndyCar, silly season updates. So Kirkwood signed an extension for Andretti. That's not that shocking.
No, not remotely.
Uh, Something that is kind of shocking to me was Kiffin Simpson signed with Ganassi, and I guess they're on. I don't know. Are they? I think they're expanding their car lineup or something.
Yeah, I do believe that is how that's gonna work. Yeah, signing with with Ganassi, and they're going to, yes, from what it sounds like, they will be expanding their car lineup, which, yeah, certainly was a little bit of a surprise. Not something I necessarily saw coming, but I don't know. I guess raking in that, sweet, sweet money from Alex Palou walking away with the championship constantly.
I mean, I'm shocked they signed Kiffin just because. I mean, I know like he's their development driver, but I was shocked they signed him like so quickly because like he hasn't been doing that well in like Indy Next.
Hmm.
I mean, he has been doing well in like other series that he races in, but I'm like, okay, if they
Yeah,
like it, I love it.
yeah. I don't know enough about Kiffin. I suspect the money is probably what
Yeah,
has
probably. And then
something to.
he's very young still. Like he's only like 18.
Hmm. Yeah. So that's what I am assuming. But yeah, certainly in he, in F4, because in F4 he was very, very quick. And even, yeah, running in, GTs, he was pretty darn good. So he seems to be a versatile young man. So maybe there's something there that we're missing. But, certainly, yeah, as an initial signing, because, yeah, in his Indy Next campaign has certainly been nothing to write home about, like, at all. But,
Yeah, it's kind of just his Indy next season was kind of forgettable, to be honest.
yeah, I know he got, I think if I remember correctly, one pole and two podiums. And I think that was it.
I mean, I think he finished like 10th or something in the standings as a
Yeah,
whole. I don't
that
know.
sounds about right. But
Again, very forgettable.
yeah, but like I said, like you said, he's yeah, he's just a kiddo, so he's got plenty of time to certainly grow and develop, and certainly, as much as I love the man's name after Stingray's rookie campaign in IndyCar this year, he can't be any worse than that, surely. So I mean, okay. Yeah, he should certainly bring home less
Poor
broken race
Stingray.
cars. Yeah, exactly.
So apparently we had, I think his first name is Christian Rasmussen, and
Oh,
Oliver
yeah.
Askew tested with ECR, which I'm like, I would love an Oliver Askew redemption arc in IndyCar. I would love that.
Yeah, I completely agree. It would be great to see him, it would be great to see him get a full-time drive again. Um, I I don't know if he's gonna get it necessarily, because I mean, Christian was the winner of last year's,
Yeah,
Indy
he's
Next.
he's pretty good.
Yeah, he was the winner in Indy Next last year. So, logic would dictate that Christian is probably gonna end up with, ECR. But I would love to see Oliver back in the series. Great dude. I know weren't great results, but like I said, he's a great dude, and I feel like getting
I
a.
feel like he got shafted, honestly.
Yeah, he did. I was just about to say he got kind of the short end of that stick, but I feel like like I said, a proper redemption arc would be great for him. I would absolutely love it if he got a full time drive again.
Yeah, honestly, it would, as much as I would like it, again, like you said, logically, it's probably more likely that they would go with Christian just because was pretty good during Indy Next.
Yeah, he is
So,
him.
yeah, for sure. So, honestly, if they were like, if ECR is looking to like I don't know. Because I don't know, their season ECR, their season in IndyCar too was a little bit forgettable to be honest as well. I mean, especially that unfortunate blunder by Rena's VK at the 500, running into
Yeah.
Alex Palou in the pits. Yeah, it's kind of yikes.
Mhm. Yeah, that was probably the biggest highlight, air quotes, of their season was Renus rear-ending, Alex. But, yeah, so we'll see, because, no, they need, certainly ECR needs, some fast guys at that team, so, yeah, I hope they like I said, either one, it'll probably be Christian, but I don't really think they could go super wrong with Oliver or Christian, so, yeah, I guess we'll see what happens there.
It just reminds me, I forgot Felipe Drugovich. He turned down, I guess, a test from ECR in IndyCar.
Yeah, that's
It's kind of
yeah,
weird because I'm like, I don't. It's not likely. I mean, it's probably known already that he's not going to F1 next season. So he'll probably just be a reserve driver or something. Because I guess people were speculating that okay, he wasn't gonna go to IndyCar obviously because he turned down the test. And then I guess people were thinking that he would have gone to Formula E, which I'm like, that doesn't seem like that's happening either. Because I think all of Formula E, all of their stuff, their silly season is kind of wrapping up. Like most of their rides are confirmed already,
mhm.
and he is not anywhere in the picture. So it's like kind
Yeah,
of bizarre.
well, Felipe is doing that thing that, well, unfortunately, a lot of F2 champs kind of fall into the trap of. He's trying desperately to wait on an F1 drive. So even though there are other, teams and other, open wheel series, IndyCar, Formula E that come a knocking, and he's like, no, but his window is closing and is closing rapidly. He turned down uh a potential option in IndyCar with ECR, um, which I mean, and it's not to say that under their IndyCar teams wouldn't necessarily come a knocking, but I mean, other teams do see that. So, a lack of interest, they may be like, okay, well, he's not worth pursuing. So that door may close. And yeah, Formula E, they've pretty much all seats are effectively spoken for. I think there are a couple still floating around, but his biggest shot at a ride in anything would be if Williams boots Logan Sargent at the end of
Which
the
that
season.
is another thing. A lot of people are like, yeah, Logan Sargent has been stinking it up the whole season. We want him out. I'm like, yeah, his season has not been too great. Pretty once again on the theme of forgettable racing seasons. His season's been pretty forgettable. Like kind of like a can't really say checkers or wreckers because it's not like he's really running up front, but he's either finishing the race or not.
Hmm.
But it's like I personally don't see Williams just like kicking him to the curb after one season because he is their development driver and they did invest a lot of time and money into him. So it's like I feel like they're probably gonna try to get as much out of him as they can instead of just being like, yeah, one season, one and done. Like as much as people don't want him in that seat and they want somebody else, I don't see them just again just randomly dropping him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little tough. So there are a few things at play there. First of all, Liam Lawson getting into the AlphaTauri with zero prep, zero anything, and being fast straight away really makes Logan look bad. Because
I mean,
Logan
Liam
is
Lawson is kind of Liam Lawson is him. Like
well,
you can just
that's
put him in
true.
anything and he'll just perform pretty damn well. So I mean, he's kind of just on a different level in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's certainly fair enough. But certainly that um doesn't help Logan. And certainly in the budget cap era, a bunch of broken race cars, that doesn't help Williams. And I think that is probably the biggest reason why I think they would get rid of him at the end of the season is, Williams has been advancing. They have been getting progressively faster the last couple of years. Alex Albon has really been putting in work. He has carried that team on his back for the last couple of years. But yeah, like I said, in the budget cap era, torn up race cars is really just not a good thing, and I think that could provide some consternation. Now, certainly to your point, certainly publicly facing anyway. Williams reaffirmed sort of their faith in Logan here recently, with I know some key figures within Williams saying that yes, there is some work to do. There's certainly some development that needs to happen, but they do overall, they like what they see in Logan. And so I think, provided that they aren't, completely full of it and don't already have a replacement lined up, then I think this means we will probably see Logan back next year. But, I know Felipe had tried to tie himself to Williams as a potential Logan Sargent replacement, and I just don't see that happening. Because given that Red Bull ostensibly isn't going to do anything with Logan, because Daniel got confirmed alongside Yuki for next year, and
I
so
mean,
basically,
assuming we don't see like Logan randomly get like sacked mid-season next year in the
hmm
event that he is back in the seat, like they pull a Nick DeFries and just be like, yeah, middle of the season, you're out type deal. I don't I don't
yeah,
see Drugovich being in F1
I
currently.
don't either. And truth be told, Williams has not displayed that they are so ruthless as to get rid of drivers mid-season. I mean, truth be told, they didn't do it to Latifi, and Latifi was just objectively garbage. I mean, he seems like he's a nice enough guy, but Latifi was just, especially those last 2 years, were atrocious um, in F1. So, yeah, I don't see him. I don't see Logan. If he's back next year, I don't see him getting canned mid-season. He'll play out the season, and, then maybe we'll reevaluate for, 2025.
This is kind of controversial, but I am kind of disappointed that AlphaTauri re-signed Daniel Ricciardo instead of Liam Lawson.
Honestly, I am too. Liam came in, like I said, no prep, no nothing. He got called in the middle of the Zandvoort weekend and was quick. Like we said, Liam, I mean, pretty much if you can hack it in super formula, then in all likelihood, you'll be quick everywhere. Um, but, and I get it. It's Daniel is insanely marketable. I understand it. He is good for F1, and by extension, that means he's going to be very good for whatever team he's at. I understand there was some vested interest in re-signing him for another year. And truth be told, having only 2 races before he, breaks his hand in a crash, I know 2 races isn't really a super big sample size, but I am not convinced, just broadly, and we talked about this a little bit last recording. I am not super convinced that Daniel is, truth be told, anymore. I'm not convinced Daniel is what any team needs. Um, and the fact that you had a young talent be that quick straight away, they should have signed Liam. And now granted, I can see why maybe not, because from what I understand, Helmut Marko was directly involved in the Nick signing, and that was an absolute flop of a signing that anybody and everybody could see coming a mile away. There's a reason why Nick hadn't been in F1 up to that point, even though he was the F2 championship in, 20, whatever, 16, 17, whenever that was. It's because he's not F1 material. But I don't know, maybe Red Bull had enough of random snap decision driver signings, so that was why they decided to stick with Daniel.
Probably. I mean, it might have looked weird if they just like, he got hurt and then they're like, yeah, we're letting him go and we're gonna sign somebody else. Like maybe that, even though it's like, I don't know, you already like put somebody out mid-season. It's like the optics can't get any worse than that, I don't think.
No.
And then even the way AlphaTauri announced it was kind of weird too. Like they added, like they had Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda, then they added like Liam Lawson on the end of it, and it's like it looked like they made it look like he was like third wheeling or something.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Like, why did you announce it like this?
Yeah, I don't know what you know, well, I know what happens. AlphaTauri seems to be more subject to the whims of particularly of Helmut Marko. He seems to take a more active, interest sort of in that team as opposed to where I think Christian and, some of the higher, leadership within Red Bull Racing, I think they do everything that they can to keep Helmut, at minimum, 10 feet from, any decision making of any sort. And I think they let him go run AlphaTauri just to basically keep him out of their hair, but it doesn't really work, as evidenced by the chopping and changing of drivers pretty constantly. Um, so we'll see. And another thing, I would have liked to see Liam there because, for no other reason than to light a fire under Yuki a little bit. Don't get me wrong, Yuki has done very well this year to drag the AlphaTauri to some decent results, but occasionally he does some very, very silly things that don't really make sense. It feels like he drives down to the car a little bit, and having another driver that is just categorically quick, I think would elevate him and force him to do a little bit better. But we'll see. Like I said, I feel bad for Liam though, because he absolutely deserved a race seat. And honestly, I could see Williams scooping up him on loan for a couple years before Drugovich.
Yeah, like you said, we'll see. So, IndyCar released their schedule like at the beginning of the week, I think it was.
Hmm.
And I'm like, been looking at, I guess, trying to see people's thoughts on it, what they felt about it. And it seems like a lot of people are like not really happy with it. I mean, me personally, I'm like, it would be great to get a race like in the northeast part of the country because they don't have that. Even though it seems like if they were to do that, the only viable option would probably be to be some sort of like street course or something because New Hampshire, don't think that would happen because I think NASCAR owns that track. Same with Richmond. I think NASCAR owns it, so it's probably not likely that they would go there. Pocono, probably not. So I'm like, I mean, technically, there were some things that I did want and I got, which was there's now night races on the calendar. I think it's like one of the Iowa races is a nighttime and Gateway is nighttime, I think.
Hmm.
So I'm like, okay, I'll be happy with that. A lot of people seem to be really unhappy with the fact that Texas was off the schedule, which I'm like, that was not really shocking because in the weeks leading up to before they even released the schedule, it was largely speculated that Texas was not going to be on the schedule just because there was like conflicts with SMI and like NASCAR potentially moving their dates to like springtime, which inevitably conflicts with the time that IndyCar goes there. And respectfully, SMI does not give a fuck about IndyCar, so they are not gonna try and like stick their necks out or do anything to accommodate them. So they kind of just get the short end of the stick. Which I'm like, yeah, it is a little bit disappointing that Texas is not on there because they did manage to put on a good race at Texas this past season, but it's just it is what it is. And then Texas Motor Speedway kind of has some other problems with it that are not specifically like related to the racing product. Like I've heard that like the venue itself is not that great anyways. So it's like it probably was up in the air how long Texas was even going to stay on the schedule anyways. It's possible that it comes back in the future like 2025, 2026, but currently 2024 it's not on there. However, they did add two new oval races. They added the Milwaukee Mile, which was what a lot of people were asking for. A lot of people were asking for more oval races, and technically they got it.
Yeah, all in all, it is, the schedule. It is where IndyCar will be going. Um, the happy with it as such. That's always a little difficult because I mean, especially with the way, understanding a lot of the sort of behind the scenes kind of wheeling and dealing required to put these together. There are usually some constraints of some sort. Um, super cool to see some night races on the calendar. I'm a little surprised it's taken this long. Cool that Gateway is one of them. Formula Drift regularly goes to Gateway, and that's a night event. Gateway looks super cool at night. So it'll be fantastic to see them run under the lights there. Um, super cool to see the Milwaukee Mile there. Trucks at Milwaukee Mile was super duper fun earlier this year. So I'll be interested to see how Indy cars run there. Yeah, not super surprised that Texas ended up going away. Like you said, it had been rumored that it was gonna go just because of SMI and NASCAR potentially thinking about shuffling the date. And frankly, the product at Texas up until basically this year hadn't really been that great anyway. So a lot of people had been calling for Texas's, metaphorical head for a while. Why we go to Texas, stop going to Texas, so on and so forth. So between that and potentially some date shuffling on the NASCAR side, it's easy to see where this was an event that was going to get dropped. Um, Even if it did make for a genuinely good race this year.
I mean,
um,
personally, I wouldn't have if Texas had gotten like axed like 2021, 2022, I probably wouldn't have cared that much,
oh yeah, no,
honestly.
I wouldn't have given a shit at all. It'd have been totally fine if it had gone a couple years ago. But yeah, I don't mind the schedule. Like I said, certainly, like I said, super cool to see Gateway under the lights. And I am very curious to see the Milwaukee Mile and to see how that goes with these cars. Um, the big thing is, certainly the addition of I say addition, but rather Thermal Club as basically an exhibition race. It's like that's interesting.
I mean, me personally, I have like mixed opinions on it just because I'm like, I mean, for one, really, it's just because it's like Thermal Club is obviously just like a private, like country club type thing, and I never really like those type of things just because like if you go back and like look at the history of like country clubs and like elite clubs and stuff like that, it's usually you find like it's rooted in like racism and segregation and like elitism. So it's like that's just my opinion on why I don't really like venues like that. But I guess it is pretty beneficial for like teams because they can get people to basically just throw money at them.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, certainly, I am not super up to scratch about the history of Thermal Club. Now, I have been there a few times, and as a circuit, it's a fun circuit. Well, at least in fast road cars, that is. No clue what it'll be like, with proper open wheel race cars. But for fast road cars, Thermal Club is a very, very fun circuit. And to be fair, OEs very regularly rented out for press launches when they've got performance cars there. Um, so like I said, that'll be interesting to see. Yeah, so no, I don't on the surface, I don't mind this. It's all in the execution, right? Provided that, IndyCar don't find some new and creative way to spectacularly screw this up, then it should be fine. But certainly there has been lots of hand wringing on social media about it. Holy smokes, people do not like this at all.
I mean, it's just a lot. Like, I mean, IndyCar fans in general are just very opinionated people.
Oh yeah,
I
there's just
am a little bit disappointed though that they dropped the double header weekend they had at the Indy Road Course with NASCAR. I thought, like, personally, like, I haven't gone to any of those events, but I thought, like, all in all, it was a good deal for like race fans, like people who just like racing in general and like will be willing to watch like anything. I thought it was a pretty good deal for you to like see like multiple series at one track in like one weekend. So I'm kind of sad they got rid of that. But that took, I think Milwaukee is what took the place of that.
Yeah,
And
I'm pretty
honestly, I
sure.
mean, like, I don't know. The Indy road course probably didn't need two dates anyways, even though like I would have
No.
preferred they dropped the first date like in May, just because I always thought that like that race was never really all that like interesting anyways. Like I thought like that was probably one of the most like lackluster races the whole season. So I'm like, yeah, I would have been perfectly fine if they dropped that one and just had the other date, but
Yeah,
it is
it's
what it is.
yeah, it is, and the truth be told, it always feels a little weird, because I mean, you have all of, the month of May stuff that goes on, where basically you're at Indy, for 3 weeks, and then, you go back, later in the summer, and then you've got the Indy road course. That's always felt so weird to me. It's like, okay, well, why not? Like, why do we have this? No, I don't mind that it's, a race on the schedule. I don't mind that IndyCar goes to, funny enough, its namesake circuit a handful of times. I think that's perfectly appropriate. It's just the way that the road course is always slotted into the calendar always feels a little strange to me. But yeah, like I said, much like it, it is what it is. It's whatever. I don't have particularly strong opinions one way or another. But that is a perfect segue into the next bit.
Yeah, IMSA was making their return to Indianapolis. What was it? Like a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
I don't know when it was. I thought it was overall a pretty decent race, I thought.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Now I adore sports car racing, particularly IMSA, ALMS way back when. I love it, so I would be hard pressed to be disappointed. And I guess I'll throw that out there right now. It will be difficult if you're IMSA. I'm gonna pretty much always give you a thumbs up at least. But no, I mean, all joking aside, I genuinely thought it was a fine race. We'll
The
move
only
on.
complaint I had was there was like some little issue during like a safety car period or a full course yellow period where there was like, I guess apparently there's like a rule that they have that if you don't follow race control's instructions in like a timely manner, like you can end up losing your position under full course yellow. And somehow that's how like the 31 Cadillac got ahead of one of like the Porsche Penske's. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that was a rule. Like, when was that a thing?
Yeah, I didn't know either. Now, I will say this is probably the one consistent complaint that I have always had about IMSA and its various iterations is that I have never really liked the way they've handled, especially full course yellows versus local
Yeah,
yellows, and then the way, they get the field put together and sort of, pit lane. I've never enjoyed the way they've done that because there have been lots of times where it's like, okay, well, this could have been a local yellow.
because there were
Um,
plenty of times in that race where there was like, I think there happened to be like a little bit of like debris or something in like turn one because there were like a little bit of like calamities in turn one when they started. Like somebody, I think it was like the Cadillac had like some body work got taken off from somebody. And it was just like it was minimal. And it's like they threw a whole full course yellow for some tiny debris in like one turn. It's like, do we really need a full course yellow for some debris in one turn when the rest of the racetrack is fine?
yeah, so no, I've never loved that. And I mean, and this has been a gripe that I have had with IMSA for the last, more than decade. Because this has been the case, and it drives me bananas. Um,
I mean, it gets particularly bad when you start having like longer races, like
mhm.
10 hours. 8 hours, 24 hours, 12 hours, where it's like you start having where you have to throw full course yellows for like tiny bits of debris or whatever, or too much like marble buildup on the track. And it's like you start getting to the point where it's like you're spending like half the race under a full course yellow because the period, like the cautions are just like, I don't
So
know. They need
long.
to change whatever they do with their current like caution procedures. They need to change them because it's like this is not working. Part of the reason why some of the 24 hours of Le Mans this year was a little bit hard to watch to some
Mhm.
extent because that new rule that they had, it's like I swear, they spent like 6 hours of that whole race under safety car.
Yeah,
Probably
that's
exaggerating a little bit, but it
yeah, it
felt like
felt
it.
like a lot. Yeah. Yeah, and, certainly in Daytona this year was kind of the same. We had these long caution periods at times where it's just like, "Oh my god." It's like I am not watching. I am, not paying a subscription to watch, under, Daytona under caution for 45 minutes, a full course yellow for
The 24
45 minutes.
hours of cautions.
Yeah, exactly. It's wild. I don't enjoy it at all. So, yeah, no, they definitely need to overhaul the way they do it, because it's not good, and it feels like it's only gotten worse. The more I think back, it feels like it's gotten worse in the last about
It's probably
5 to 10
felt like
years.
it's gotten worse because, especially at a race like Daytona, there were a lot of cars in that race. So the more cars you have in a race, that it's more likely you're going to have a lot of like full course yellows. And then it takes a long time to do the full course yellows as it is. And then also like reset the field. It's like, eh,
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. I mean, we talked about it at the top of the show, but, I definitely, the especially the few times that I have been like, earlier that I had been super into sports car racing, endurance racing was frankly in a period during, two sort of economic crunches, the one right at the turn of the millennium and, '02, where there was the dip, and then of course in, '08 or '09, and oh goodness, the stories of how thin that grid was in 2008, 2009, 2010. Good God. You know, I mean, truth be told, a lot of series grids had gotten pretty thin, but it was really bad in IMSA. That was part of why the GT1 category folded and became GT2 all those years ago, was because for factory efforts, it was Corvette and I think it was Corvette and the Flying Lizard Porsches, and I think that was it. Because Ferrari had bounced, Ford had bounced, Aston Martin bounced mid-season and just didn't tell anybody.
they're
Um,
probably what did it look like I think it's now like there's like this series. It's like kind of like I think it might be like a branch of like DTM. It's like ADAC or something. Where it's like there were like a total of like 8 cars in the whole field.
oh yeah, ADAC, yeah. So I haven't thought about them in years, but part of it is
They're
because
like
that's.
dying, I think. I think they're on like their deathbed because
I was
that
just about
field
to
did
say,
not look good.
yeah, no, ADAC has been dying a slow death for the last 10 years. You know, ALMS was never part of being multi-class racing. It was never that bad because you still had the privateer. I guess it was, GT3s, like, because, Porsche's always contested basically two different GT categories, BMW in the lower classes and so on. But so, you always, had usually a handful of cars. It was never, sub 10 cars bad, but it was kind of rough there for a period, because you didn't have a whole lot of prototypes during that period, because Cadillac had given up, Acura had given up. Audi and Porsche only had contested a select few of the IMSA, or well, ALMS back then, races, and they were mostly on the European calendar. So yes, you had like, I honestly don't even remember who was in prototypes in that period. I remember Acura for a bit, but like I said, that's it. So yeah, my point being is a whole lot of words to say. Um, Certainly having this many cars is it's kinda wild to me because certainly growing up watching the series, it was never the grid is probably twice as big now as it was then.
I mean, at least it's a good thing. Like the sport is it's healthy and it's thriving.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's fantastic. I love it, the manufacturer level of participation. I know there's always some griping, from the privateer teams about, oh, we don't have the money of the factory teams, and that's part of why the GT class is getting folded in the way that it is because it's basically for factory teams, it's Corvette and Vassar Sullivan, which functions as the factory Lexus team, and that's like it. Um, but Oh, but, although to be fair, with the Pro-Am, they'll fold because Turner is basically the factory BMW team here, so yeah, they're folding, and I know that that's some of it, but it's great to see. It's great to see so many large OEs that seem to care about sports car racing again. I love it.
So to kind of close out, we're kind of approaching on the last IMSA race of the season at Petit Le Mans. Any expectations for that race or predictions?
That's tough. Petit Le Mans is always very, very good, and, as the name suggests, it's a long one, so that's one of those races where a lot can happen. I am feeling less confident than I was, at, um at our last recording, for Fuji, but I feel like in certainly, d Pro, GTD Pro, I feel like I don't know. And, some of it is maybe balance of performance, some of it is maybe that, just as simple as, Vassar Sullivan has found some pace. I feel like Vassar Sullivan may well tie up, the pro class for the GTs. Um, Not quite sure what's happened here, but these last few races, Corvette's form has looked a little shaky, which is such a bummer to say that in the final year of Corvette racing, kind of as we know it. But I think Vassar Sullivan's got it. For certainly GTP. I almost want to say hypercar. Um,
I mean, technically they're the same
I know
thing.
technically they're the same thing, but for uh for GTP, Um, I think Cadillac has found some pace here recently, which has been cool, but just the Acuras are just so fast. And I don't really see that changing much.
I
And
mean,
I
I'll say like the at least the 10 accurate, they've been pretty racy the whole season. That hasn't really changed. Meyer Shank, the 60, they kind of fell off a
Yeah,
little
they
bit.
did fall off a bit, yeah. But so yeah, I see it continuing to be kind of business as usual. But the big thing, and this is the thing that I would not have pegged at the start of the season, which is BMW has been getting steadily quicker throughout the year as they've wrapped their heads around that car. But just a combination of reliability issues plaguing the 963, the Porsche. Um, and then the fact that, truth be told, and I don't know if maybe to solve the reliability issues, they're not running that car quite as hard because it seems like they've also just gotten slower too.
The Porsches, I mean, I don't know. Like I I can't really say whether or not they fix reliability issues because it's like they seem to do fine in like sprint races, which is like obviously not 10 hours, but like
No,
anytime it's an endurance race, which kind of sucks when you are running in an endurance race in like the World Endurance Championship and then have to run in endurance races in IMSA as well. Kind of fucking sucks when your car does not make it the
no,
entirety of the race. So it's like I don't really know. It's possible that their car gives out because I mean personally I was expecting one of the Porsches to die during Fuji.
yeah, I
Didn't
was
seem
too.
like that happened, but I don't know. It was pretty bad for them at Le Mans,
Hmm.
Daytona, and then Sebring. Sebring wasn't too bad for them if it weren't for that incident that happened at the very end of the race. And BMW if you had told me that BMW, like if you had gone back to the beginning of the season at Daytona and you would have told me that BMW by the end of the year would be fighting for a fucking championship, I would laugh because they were so bad. It's like, who would have thought that they would have improved that much? But good for them.
Yeah, no, it was a shaky start to the car, and they have pulled it together. And certainly props to BMW for actually like taking the time and working on it. Because I mean, we've seen this before with cars not being quick out of the gate, and they either drop it and try something else, or they just leave that particular category entirely. Their GT2 program, the E92s were quick, um, but then they were aging, so they moved to the Z4s, which were atrocious. So then they tried the M6s, which weren't too bad, but never as competitive as the E92s. And then the M8s, which were just slow.
The M8s were slow, but they had so many memes.
Yes, and don't get me wrong, my big beautiful M8, I love that car to death, but it just was never competitive, and they basically rage quit GT and moved down GTD Pro and moved down to AM with the M4, which I mean, granted, that's worked for them okay so far, and like because the M4 GT3 is like quick, it's like really quick, but yeah, I didn't expect for them to work as diligently on the GTP car as they have, so certainly good on them.
I'm hoping Cadillac doesn't pull a repeat of what happened last year at Petit Le Mans and end up running into each other and crashing another race.
Yeah, that'd be great. I have to think that there were, in the lead up to Petit Le Mans, there have been some competition meetings where it's just, they sit everybody down in front of a screen, and it's just a replay of last year's Petit Le Mans, and it's, with the message
Like,
underneath,
here's what we're
don't
not gonna do.
yes, don't do this. I can't imagine that it would be anything anything else. So I don't think that they'll make that mistake, but given
I
the
mean,
fact
as long as they'll have to. I mean, who even was that last year? I was Van der Zan and Bamber. It's like
I think
as
so,
long as you
yeah.
like keep them reined in, then maybe we shouldn't have that happen.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think you're right. Because actually, to be fair, they had a couple of run-ins when they had overlapping stints at Le Mans. They bumped into each other a bit and were getting quite racy. So yeah, I don't know, but yeah, just keep them away from each other at the same time. Maybe make sure that their stints don't coincide with each other or overlap in any way, and it should be fine. But
And
no, I
clearly, we
think
need to keep the Porsches away from the number 10 Acura too.
oh yes.
Specifically, Gemini and Albuquerque.
Mm-hmm.
Do not have them in the car at the same time.
Yeah, because no, the Porsche, yeah, very much set to kill as well. But yeah, no, I think Petit Le Mans is gonna be will be fun. I like that GTP has gotten as wide open as it has. That's super duper fun. Um, and like I said, I think Vassar Sullivan is gonna take the final year of pro genuinely. But yeah, I guess we'll see. And then I mean, and then pro am or sorry, just am sorry, is is as wide open as it is. I mean, it's a huge category, and there are so many cars in am. So I mean, Lord knows it'll probably be the Lexuses there too. To be fair, but I don't know. Maybe somebody can throw up a surprise.
I mean, I have multiple teams that I pull for, at least in like GTP and like other classes. So honestly, like I'll be somewhat satisfied if like my main teams don't do well. I can always just fall back on other teams.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I've always had a soft spot for the a lot of the factory teams. So I love Cadillac, Cadillac Racing, and Corvette Racing. Also growing up 15 minutes from GM's world headquarters does that too. But but no, I love it. So yeah, we'll see. And I mean, it's Petit Le Mans. Regardless of what happens, it'll probably be pretty fun. So
Either way, we will be there no matter what.
exactly. So open mic time. Any thoughts, feelings, questions, concerns before we close it out?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, one thing I actually do want to touch on really quick before we move on, and this is just because it is very, very funny to me. You know, Aston Martin backed out of Hypercar with the Valkyrie. They were like, well, actually, no, never mind. Well, now the rumor mill is swirling that they have backtracked on their backtrack, which feels like quite the double negative. I don't know what that actually would be. But anyway, they may well be actually deciding to come back and they will contest Hypercar with the Valkyrie. So, what all of this back and forth was for, haven't the foggiest idea, but apparently we may actually be getting that car on the WEC grid after all. So, make of that what you will.
For sure.
But with that, well, we bid you adieu. As always, thanks for listening. And, well, we will see you in the next one.